And we are live. Welcome to this episode of Totally Unscripted. So I'm delighted today, as well as Steve. We've got Cleo Espiritu, who's a fellow Google Apps Script developer expert. Hello, Cleo.
Hello.
And I think James Ferrero might be sneaking in, so we may get some comments from James as we go along, but we'll see. We'll see how we get on. So hi James, and obviously hi Steve. And so without further ado, we're going to crack in. So I'm going to start off by just giving an overview of Google Hangouts Chat, so you get an idea of that. And then Cleo's got some examples as well of kind of things that you can do. So really, this is kind of a starter for you to just kind of dip your toe in the water and find out what you can actually do with this product. So I'm going to just jump into slides. Here we go. So we'll make the slides available at the end of the show as well. So you can, there's a couple of links in these slides. References to bits and pieces. So let's start with Hangouts Chat. So this is Google's new platform for communication. It's available just to G Suite users. So if you've used the classic Hangouts on Gmail, you won't be able to access Hangouts Chat. You'll need a G Suite account. So this will be a G Suite Education or Enterprise. And it's kind of a relook at internal communication and messaging for Teams. Google got it web, and they've got it on mobile as well. And as well as kind of the web interface, they've already got an API, so you can start scripting stuff in your Hangouts chat. So you can create bots that can be part of messages and rooms, and so there's lots of scope here for doing some really cool automation stuff. In terms of creating your bots, you've actually got a number of options. So with the Hangouts Chat API, you can do something where you've just got essentially you're running a web service. So you're just making HTTP requests to something that's maybe on-prem or in the cloud. That can hook up into something else, and it's passing it back into the bot, and the bot is then interacting with the user who's interfacing via the Hangouts application. You can even do, if you want, you can go into Cloud PubSub and do some more stuff in terms of subscribing and receiving that kind of push-pull notification. But also another option for you is to use Google Apps Script. So with Google Apps Script, you can deploy a bot very quickly. So hopefully you're all familiar with Apps Script. It's a cloud serverless environment, and is one of the real benefits of Apps Script. If you've been doing stuff in Apps Script already, is it's already highly integrated into other G Suite services. So if you want to access into Calendar or Gmail or a whole host of other Google products, you can do that incredibly easily. But which one do you choose? Well, Google recommends looking at your use case. So for Google Apps Script, they suggest if you're primarily using G Suite data, then that's the one to go for. So something to bear in mind if you're developing stuff in Hangouts Chat about kind of where you're going to go in terms of what you want to do with the bots that you create at the end of the day. So in terms of an Apps Script boilerplate for Hangouts Chat, there's a couple of bot events that you can hook into. So if you've been doing stuff, I guess with Google Sheets or Docs, you have these kind of other events like on open or that you can hook into. So similarly with bots, you've got events. So on add to space, as you can imagine, it's when the bot is actually added into a room, or you start a discussion with it, or remove from space, again, removing from a room or a friend's conversation. And two more. So on card click. So if you've been doing stuff with Gmail add-ons, you'll know that there's a card service used for the UI, and it's similar for Hangout chatbots. So rather than using a HTML service, you create your cards, which are in a JSON format, and then you can have a degree of interaction with the user, and as part of that, you can detect when a card is clicked. So there are examples of doing some very simple polling stuff, so you can have up and down buttons and so on, and you're just going to track that. Probably the main one that you want to deal with is on message events. So this is when a user converses with their bot. You can basically handle that event and deal with it. So in practice, what does this look like? So let's do a quick demo. So here's a bot. So there's this is one of the examples that Google released as part of the launch of a bot that integrates into Google Maps. In this example, I'm going to also hook into Google Drive, and basically, if I jump into this tab here, hopefully you can see. I'll make this a bit bigger. So I've got my Where is Bot, and you can see I've already been testing some things with my bot. So all this bot is going to do is when I interact with it, so it's where is, well, as I'm close to Edinburgh, where is Edinburgh? So what's happening on the back end here is the bot is going off with the location I'm looking for, and it's going to Google Maps, and it's just chucking a marker on the map and bringing that back as a card. So in terms of the card, we can show an image, but we can also add interactive elements to the card. So in this one, I can just open it up in Google Maps. So that's a really simple example of the type of thing that you can do. So just looking at the code behind this, so we've got our on-message event. So you can look at the documentation in terms of what's available as the event object. So in this case, we've got the message, and as part of that, we're extracting the display name of the bot. And then the next part is we're just taking the message text and we're just stripping out this display name. So we're using the rest of the string just to find out a location. And then to create our card, we're just creating a JSON object, and then we return that. So for the demo I showed you, it's slightly different in terms of we're caching the map in Google Drive. So we're hooking into the benefits of Google Apps Script there and easy integration. So if you want to have a closer look at the codes when we share the link, you can delve into to look at that. Looking at something a bit more advanced, so as part of the release as well, then Google also created a code lab. So there's a code lab for attendance bot. So this bot allows you just to create a way for a user to set their Gmail vacation or block out the calendar. So with this example, you're getting more into the in-depth detail of handling events, handling messages, and also dealing with cards and working out how you can display cards. So it's a really nice example just to get kind of cut your teeth, and it was actually kind of the first a piece of coding with Google Hangouts Chat that I got started with. So one of the things with when you start working with Hangout chatbots is this whole idea of you've got messages and kind of extracting the intent out of those messages. So in the Hangouts attendance bot example, it's quite limited in terms of what you can do, and it's not intelligent in terms of the words that you're putting in, so it can't work out variations. If it doesn't see the word sick or it doesn't see the word vacation, it's lost. So there's some programming you can do to ask the user to confirm their choices, but another option is rather than kind of busting your brain on a ton of regex expressions, you can actually integrate with other services. So AppScript, as well as integrating within the existing advanced services within G Suite, you can hook into other services and just make a URL fetch. So for example, with your chatbots, you might want to hook into Dialogflow, which is a product developed by, bought by Google, which actually allows you to pass messages in and extract the intent out. So if that's something you want to look into, I've got a blog post which you can delve into, which goes through the whole process of setting up Dialogflow and using that with a Hangouts chatbot. But rather than going into that right now, I'm just going to pause there, see if our Steve or Cleo have anything to say in terms of what I've missed. Or we can hand straight on to Cleo, who's going to talk a bit more about the types of integration that you can do with AppScript.
Awesome, thanks, Martin. And I think you gave a really good overview. So on my side, I've been kind of tinkering with the idea of integrating this Hangout chatbot API to work with data created in AppMaker. So on the next slide, we'll see the diagram. And so why was I exploring this? Basically, with AppMaker, you can create your own custom interface. You can create responsive web pages so that you could load, say, on a mobile phone or other resolutions. I think one of the questions people ask, though, it's they kind of wish it's an app, which it's not an actual mobile native app that you install on your mobile phone. But I was thinking if it's just, there's use cases where it's just simple tasks they need to complete on maybe on their phone and so forth, maybe a chatbot could actually help them with that. So that's why I kind of investigated this path. And the concept is that the AppMaker app populates data into a Cloud SQL database, which then on your AppScript project, you can just connect back to and retrieve the same data. And so I'll walk through a couple examples here. So on the next slide, for anyone who has used AppMaker, there's a couple of templates that's already in there. One is the document approval one, which you'll see here, and it is a straight off, right off the box AppMaker. So if you never even built an app before, you can open AppMaker, select a new project, pick this document approval templates, and deploy it, and essentially you have a working document approval app, which lets you send documents to specific people for approval. So that's one example. And on our second slide here, there's also the project tracker template, which again, it's a template in AppMaker. It allows you to keep track of projects and all the tasks under it. So I was thinking from a chatbot perspective that it could be interesting to just be able to just send a message to the chatbot to say, hey, what's my outstanding task? And what's my outstanding approvals that are waiting for me to look at. And so with by creating a Google Apps Script project with connection to the Cloud SQL, that actually can be quite easily accomplished. So on the next slide here, you can see the little bot that I have created. So it actually reads data from both the document approval app and the project tracker app, which depending on what you say to the bot, it will query the appropriate one as needed. So first one, if I say see my task, it knows it's looking at the project side, giving you a list of tasks that's still assigned to you and that's still outstanding. You can say things like approval, and it will go to the document approval apps database instead and query the information there. For this one, it's quite simple. So all I did was the string matching. It's really just looking for task and approval, but it could actually go a little more in depth. In the past, I've also tinkered with the Cloud Natural Language API to actually extract different entities, whether it's specific locations or other entities that I'm looking for, to actually base my query off those. So you can actually go really nice with it. And also, like Martin mentioned, is the dialog flow. You can go a little smarter than just looking at little keywords in the sentences. On the next slide, I just kind of post a simple snippet of how this was accomplished. So on the on message, basically, I didn't show the code to kind of determine whether I'm looking at task or approval. But once I determined that, essentially, it's just a JDBC connection into the database that is shared in the AppMaker app. And we execute the statement, the SQL statement, based on what we need to query. So it's grabbing the current user's email and is querying any tasks that are assigned to that person that's still outstanding. And then we built on the JSON card object as described in the Hangout Chat API documentation and returned those cards that you saw in the earlier side, where then user can see the list. They can click on a link, which the AppMaker app has the actual full task view. So by providing that link, if they really want to dive into more, they can click on that and then they can work on it in the AppMaker app. Or I can even go further and say maybe they can actually just approve a document right there by saying approve or click on certain actions in the card. So there's definitely a lot of possibilities you can do with the chatbot and giving a different different user interface for the user to use to interact with your application. Yeah, that's all I have.
Thanks for that, Cleo. So we'll have a moment in a second where we can just kind of discuss developing stuff with Hangouts Chat. But before we do that, just a couple of links. So the documentation for Hangouts Chat, this is all published in public. It's not and you don't need to sign up for any betas or preview. It's out now, so you can start developing stuff now. So if you go to developers.google.com/hangoutschat, you'll find out all the documentation and referencing around there. I have to say, I don't know about you, Cleo, but when I looked at that documentation, whilst it had some stuff on Google Apps Script, it didn't really have much explanation about the kind of the boilerplate I went through in terms of creating projects for Google Apps Script. I know you've done more stuff with other server languages, but something to bear in mind. And so it is a bit of navigating around. And I can see Cleo nodding. And something that Steve highlighted that came up in the Google Plus community, this example from Jeffrey on developing bots. This is actually a really good tutorial in terms of not only finding about Hangouts chatbots and developing those with AppScript, but also setting up your local development environment in AppScript. So if you've looked at Clasp and VS Code and bits and pieces like that, GitHub integration in the past, but we're just wanting to find a good starting point that went through the whole process, I can highly recommend this post. This will go through all that in great detail. So those are the bits and pieces that I think are worth highlighting. So Cleo, in terms of your experience developing Hangouts chatbots, are there any tips or any kind of pinch points you've encountered yourself when developing stuff?
I think what you mentioned about the documentation is actually quite accurate. And yeah, I think because I've done it as a Google Apps project, I've also tried it in the doing it as a cloud function. And so, and my Node.js isn't really the greatest, but, but yeah, so just diving through and even just, formatting of the cards are like the JSON objects, and it's quite in depth, and there's so many options to do it, and it's just kind of getting that straight. So what I've always done is, if I want to do a card thing, is it starts so super simple, a text card, and then build up then the nicer image and the links and all that stuff. And yeah, like the documentation side, I think it is a bit of a hop around, and yeah, I think I'll share my posts and share my code in a blog post somewhere at some point, and kind of link to all the documentation that goes in, because it does take time, and patience is kind of a bit of a key there.
Steve, was there anything that jumped out to you in that questions or things you'd like to delve into?
Yeah, I thought it was nice what I've seen so far. I mean, well done. When Cleo was explaining some of her slides, it made me think about the sentiment analysis, where you're checking a SQL database perhaps to get all the comments or reviews or whatever that bucket is, and then it'll come back to say, here are all the negative ones. Right. So if I want to be quick with my data, say, is there any fires I need to put out? You could ask it to do the analysis to say, yes, there's 4 people who are kind of not happy right now. So you can go in and just take care of that. So I think it's pretty neat, the possibility what you can do with these chatbots. Another comment is, I believe it is possible to write a chatbot and put it on the G Suite Marketplace to install or to sell. So I believe there's that possibility as well.
Yeah, and I think as usual, I think you got to work out your own monetization, but I might be wrong on that. But I think it's interesting, your comment about essentially having a conversation with your own data. I think it's really interesting. Google Assistant on 1 billion devices plus now, that we're coming to a point where that's how people like to interface stuff more and more. So I can see that developing a lot more.
Yeah, I think where some of the concerns are is, I want to know if I'm speaking to a bot or a human. So I don't know if there's going to be protocols, ethics, or standards that we should be using, but makes you think about it.
We both talked about the card interface, and perhaps I'll just quickly share my screen just so that you can see what type of thing you're going to have to be dealing with. So this is the where is bot. So this is the code that we talked about in terms of handling the message event. And then down here, we've got our little widget. So initially, it looks fairly straightforward, that we're just updating some bits and pieces. So we've got an image link that we're just putting in here, and we're adding basically essentially a URL. But in terms of the card object that we're updating here, it's at the top of the screen, and you can see it's highly nested. There are lots of bits and pieces for you to get lost in. I have to say, I don't know about you, Cleo, this is where Stackdriver logging has kind of come to it in its own for me, in terms of working out what's going wrong with your bot?
Yeah, for sure. Because if your card is wrong, then you try it, and then it doesn't. It just says, I forgot what the error message was. Very generic, right? So yes, definitely the logging really helps.
And in terms of the front end experience when your stuff goes wrong, let me just share my screen again. So if we go into the where is bot, so one of the things I was when I was trying this example earlier, you see I did lots of examples, was so in terms of our code, it's extracting the username, the bot name out of the code. But if I just put a space here rather than selecting the where is bot and then putting Edinburgh back in there, you'll see it basically it's not responding. So you get, which is good for the user, I suppose, in terms of they're not getting a horrible error message. But as a developer, you've then got to work out actually what's going wrong here. So I think that'll be one of my tips is lean on Stackdriver to work out what it is that's going wrong when Sign isn't working.
Yeah, for sure.
Are there any quotas to be concerned about of volume? For example, how many people can hit the chat bot at the same time? That sort of thing.
That's a good question. I don't know that there are any, but Cleo, do you know different?
No, I don't think so. It's been always pretty real time, but I don't have a lot of people using the same thing.
I think you'll encounter the usual app script quotas, but those are the only quotas I'm aware of. But there might be something in the documentation that says different to that. So well worth kind of considering, particularly if you're thinking of putting something on the marketplace as well. And probably something else just to mention is permissions. So and you know within AppScript projects, you might be familiar with deploying a web app and then choosing how that web app runs, either as yourself or the person at the machine. With chatbots, unless you're doing something in the back end of your code with perhaps a service account or something else, it's going to it's essentially going to run as you. So if you want to change calendar date, add stuff into your calendar, and you're interacting with a bot, it's your calendar it's going to interact with. And similarly for things like Gmail and anything else that you're interacting with via the bot, unless you do something crazy and different.
Yeah, and that is a very good point. It will always run into you, and then like sometimes when I write scripts and all the emails come from me because I had the script run on my side. So everyone's like, "Why is it you?" Like I actually did manually send all these emails.
I'm super busy and efficient. Pay me more.
Yeah, might as well name the bot after myself because it's always me anyway. Response. Yeah, definitely something to watch out for. And yeah, let your user be aware because they do get sidetracked by that.
Yeah. So I think that's about us. So unless there's anything else, Cleo, that you want to highlight, or Steve, if there's anything you've got burning.
No, I'm good. I'm good.
Yeah, I'd love to hear where people take this.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it's been great to have you on the show, Cleo. We're definitely going to get you back.
It's great to be here.
And as always, Steve, always great to have your company as well and your insight. So until next time, this has been Totally Unscripted, and we'll hope to see you again soon.